And the Salafi Dawah, the vast majority of it is rooted in in the Sharia. There's no doubt about it. The only thing that we differ with is the tabdi, to render your brother an innovator. Therefore, I have to hate you and stay away from you because you're an innovator. I got to name call you. I got to do this. That it's out of place. It's the bounds are too close together. Mm-hmm. It has to be opened up because you're not going to excommunicate even from the Sunnah, the three madhabs, the Hanafis, all of them, Malikis, almost all of them, the Shafi'is, almost all. Are you serious? That's too much. So what you should downgrade is that this is a matter, yes, we deem it what's called bid'ah ghair mufassiqah. It's, yes, I consider this to be wrong, but it doesn't remove you from the circle of brotherly love, from the circle of Ahl Sunnah, from the circle of that I will pray behind you, I'll go to your mosque, promote your operation and your teachings and all those things. That's what we call bid'ah ghair mufassiqah. I'm not even telling you to agree with the positions that you disagree with, but I'm telling you, downgrade the level of condemnation. There's essentially 3 levels of condemnation to an idea. Bid'ah mukaffira, you're out of Islam. We won't even bury you in the Muslim graveyard or let you into Mecca and Medina. That's the Qadianis, Nation of Islam, for example. Then bid'ah mufassiqah. Now, this is the one that where I don't have to be guilty of takfir, right? I'm not making takfir, but I'm making tabdi'. Everyone stay away from this guy. He's an innovator. So you brand him, label him, stay away from him, cut him off, be mean to him, encourage your followers to be mean to them. Okay, walk away from them. And then let's go get quotes for some people doing that from the past. And then that's called bid'ah mufassiqah. That in our understanding is who belongs there. Shias belong there. Mm-hmm. ISIS would belong there. Mm-hmm. Kharijites. Okay. That's a type of, and we don't even say be mean to them. We just say like, there's lines. This is heresy to us. Mm-hmm. Why not be mean to them? Because it's not good for you. It's not good for anyone looking at you. Right? That's your religion, to act like a jerk like this to people and to brand and to label and all this. So, but yes, you've gone way too far outside of the bounds. So now that there's levels inside, within Ahl Sunnah, there are strongly debated topics. But what is sound is to render those as an error. I believe this is an error, and I would even believe that it's wrong for you to say, but that conclusion come after my opinion, through my thinking, not through direct texts of Quran and Hadith, right? Through my opinion, I've come to the conclusion that this is actually completely wrong and potentially even sinful. Even if you said sinful, fine, because the Hanafis view lobster as sinful. Do we wage war now on this subject? Do Hanafis now go wage war with Shafi'is and say, you guys are eating haram, let's not marry into this family because they eat haram, they're going to feed the grandkids haram? No, you say, oh, it's their opinion. It's haram to me based on my opinion. So there is halal and haram based on Quran, and halal and haram based upon my understanding of the Quran, opinion. So if you were to downgrade your condemnation to that, no problem. Not even saying to be convinced with the other idea. Stick to your own idea, your ibadah and your aqidah, but how you're interacting with those who have another opinion. And then other little thing is that every practicing Muslim is also following the Salaf as you are. So don't let this get to your head that you're following the Salaf. So let me ask you a question. A Shafi'i scholar in Syria, or a Maliki in Morocco, or Hanafi in India 300 years ago, who were they trying to follow? Were they trying to follow the Muslims from 400 years ago? Or they were trying to also understand how the Sahaba understood Islam and what would the companions have done? How were they thinking? What was the second generation doing? What did the third generation, how were they thinking? Not just what did they say? How were they thinking? How would they have reacted? So when you follow somebody, I can follow the letter of the law of what you just said, or I can follow your method of thinking. And what's the proof that really the method is more important? For example, in Hanafi fiqh, in Maliki fiqh, in Shafi'i fiqh, and I don't know about maybe in Hanbali fiqh too, they're top scholars, students of these disciples. So Abdurrahman bin Qasim, student of Malik, the Sahibain, students of Abu Hanifa, and most of the Shafi'i scholars. They were not concerned with not what our sheikh said, is what was the sheikh's line of thinking. Given new information, what would he have said? So in our madhab, in the Maliki school, if Malik says one thing, but his top student years later says another thing, we go with this top student. Oh, wow. Yeah, because he has new information. And he says, if Malik would knew this new information, given how Malik thinks, this is what he would have done. So same with Abu Hanifa and the Sahibain. Same with Shafi'i. They say, yes, Shafi'i didn't say this, but given his methodology, if he had this information, he would have concluded this. That's far more important, because now we're not just mimicking following footsteps and letter of the law. We're looking at what is the purpose? What is the goal? What was the method of thinking? So it's not maqsadi. Maqsadi is a different thing, but it's not that. It's what is his methodology of thinking? How does he solve problems? So we should all be humble and say that these other four madhabs are also trying to follow the Salaf. And we shouldn't say they are following the Salaf. They're trying to follow, as you are trying to follow. And you're not following. Nobody follows the Salaf. We follow people telling us about the Salaf. So I can tell you about 5 Salaf or 50. I can tell you about 50. And you follow them. Yes, you are following them. But there are 50 others that you don't know about. 50 other incidences that you don't know about. So you can't say, I'm this and nobody else is that. So I say this, that all the practicing Muslims should be a bit humble and say all of us are attempting and trying best as we can to follow the right guidance. And we don't know everything. We don't know all the sayings of the Sahaba. We don't know all the sayings. We know of the Salaf what someone's told us about the Salaf. That's the difference. Even Sheikh Ad-Dadu, he said another amazing thing. He said, somebody questioned him and said, Aisha herself said she was 6 then 9. He said, yes, someone told her she was 6 and 9. How would she know her age? When little kids don't know their age unless someone tells them. Someone tells a 5-year-old that you're 5 today. It's your birthday. You're 5. And he'll keep saying he's 5. If no one tells him when his birthday is, he'll keep saying he's 5 even through when he's 6, right? So a 5, 6, 7-year-old, he's told his age. Someone said, is it fathomable that Aisha doesn't know her age? Yeah, at that age, it is fathomable. Someone told her she's 6 years old, and we don't know who that person is who could have been wrong. At the very least, it's a solitary person who's unknown. Therefore, it's up for discussion, her age, right? And there are other narrations that said based on her and Sumayya, her sister Sumayya, that she was 17. According to that calculation, would have put her at 17. So he says this is possible to be true, and this is possible to not be true. And either way, it's not a matter of doctrine. And so on the issue of age of Aisha, he says not a thing to, because number one, it's not a doctrine. Number two, it's not even absolute certainty what her age was. There's no absolute certainty. So if someone says nobody knows, it's just narrations, then they would actually be valid. Sorry, Asma, I said, not Sumayya. So it's very important, I think, for you as you develop in this field of dawah to navigate the different environments, not to be pulled into that, because it's going to kill your dawah. If you become one of those people, and there are people who do both, right? They are in a hizb, I'm going to fight for this theology, and I'm going to do street dawah to regular non-Muslims. But I personally think that you can develop your knowledge for yourself and be involved in dawah without wasting your time in online gladiator wars on, contentious theological issues, because it's going to burn your time out.
Yeah, I mean, look at what's happening with a lot of these da'is. They're fighting each other online.
It's terrible. Where's the ego part of it, right? Put the ego down. The best thing to do is, if you've ever done it before, if you're having a feud with somebody, sit between yourself and Allah, ask, what does Allah want from me? What do I want for myself? I want to be right. What does Allah want? And He wants the relationship to work. Shafi'i said, I hope the truth always comes in off my opponent's tongue, so that I know for sure I'm capable. His ego is capable of saying, you're right and I'm wrong. But I don't know if I'm right and he's wrong. I don't know if he's capable, his ego, of saying I'm wrong and you're right. That's why do you think Allah chose Shafi'i as one of the 4 great Imams?